Welcome to United Shades of Gray, Conversations of Race in America on WSGW. Now, here is your host, Kareem Bowen.
This is Kareem, host of United Shades of Gray, Conversations of Race in America. So glad that you guys are tuning in with us on today. I am in the studio today. It's just me and my main man, John B, in the place to be. What's going on, John?
Hello, hello.
Hey, man, for those of you who are listening to us here today, and you guys are used to seeing Mark Bassett with us, Mark is somewhere in the hills doing white guy things. He's out today. Actually, he's doing what I would love to be doing which I always say Smoky Mountains, not Smoky Mountains is where.
He said the Blue Ridge Mountains.
Blue Ridge Mountains.
Riding the country roads.
Yeah, okay. Blue Ridge Mountains. There was a country group that was I'm thinking the Gatlin Boys. But anyway, Gatlin Brothers or something of that nature. Is old school. This way before your time, Jonathan. But anyways, we wish him well, and we hope he's having a great time with the family. But we're here, and hopefully that's enough for you on today. I hope that doesn't detract you from wanting to listen to both John and I. But I just want to say, first of all, if you're living anywhere in the Midwest, what you've experienced today, we're recording on Wednesday. And it is a tsunami rain combination of madness. I had to take a canoe from the parking lot to the building today. Power was out, had to pop the garage door to pull the garage up, and big wooden doors are not easy things to deal with. I'm not sure if my sump pumps are working in the house. There's a whole bunch of stuff that's just going on. Power out, no internet. It's been a crazy day. But by the time that this airs, I think that we're supposed to be in milder weather, 50s, 60s, and I think heading in a week or so to the mid to upper 70s. I cannot wait. Michigan winters, Midwest winters, Chicago, y'all understand what I'm talking about. Joliet, y'all get it. Our winters are horrible, and I think the worst part about it is that they're gray winters.
Yeah.
That's what it is. I think that's the biggest part of it.
If it snowed and then we had nice sunny days and it was all nice and lovely outside, that would be great.
If you've ever been to Denver, it will snow and the sun will be out the same day. And so you get sunshine, you get the cold weather. It's cold. It doesn't even get as cold as it does here in Michigan, but it's cold, the snow's there, and you can deal with it. But when you have these gloomy, doomy days, it just makes it so difficult. But the old men winter, your days are numbered, and we're waiting for the better and warmer weather's coming. Today, we're going to continue our conversation. We've been talking about the growing inequality and the wealth gap, really, and we're really kind of concentrating on the wealth gap. We've been having some good conversations surrounding this, and it's been leaving me going home and thinking about our conversations, which is always a good thing. I think that when you have conversations that you are left with, some lingering thoughts in your mind that you kind of work through when you get home, I think is always good. So we're going to talk about that. But as usual, what we often do, we want to give a shout out to our folks down there at WJOL 1340 AM in Joliet, Illinois. And those of you who are listening here at WSGW 100.5 FM and 790 AM, we certainly welcome you to the conversation, and we are glad that you have made a place and a space for us in your day. If you caught us by accident, thanks for listening. Anyways, we don't care. Whoever's going to listen, we're excited. But we want to talk about really what's hot off the press. And it's interesting. We're going to talk about this, right, John?
Yeah, we have to.
We have to talk about this
for some reason.
We're tired about it. We're tired of it, but we have to talk about this. And I thought about how I was going to label this, and I said Trump charged. I think that kind of sums things up. Trump charged. We're talking about number 45, former President Donald Trump. He has officially been charged by the Southeastern District of New York. And I think it's a Trump charge. I think they're trumped up charges. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So it's kind of crazy. 34 counts of basically fraudulent activity. I think that America knew that he was not a Boy Scout when they hired him for the job, even when he was running for the job. And it's interesting because when I think about number 45. And I'll tell you this, I've not always not been a fan. When he first came onto the scene and he took the ride down the Golden Elevator, including the stuff that I knew about the Central Park Five and things, I was like, okay, maybe it'll be good to get someone that's outside the system, that has a savviness in business that we could utilize. And it wasn't until the crazy rhetoric, it was the personality and not necessarily the policy that was driving me crazy.
And I think that's true for a lot of people. They're not in love with him as a person and as a personality, but they kind of align with his policies. And then there are people who only really care about his personality and his who he is as a person, and don't really care about his policies. It's kind of like he can do whatever he wants. We like that he's boisterous and he's going in and kicking down doors. Okay.
He is.
But what's he actually doing?
He is good for TV.
Yes.
And I think that's, I mean, when you look at the show The Apprentice, you watch the show to see which celebrities, would get into a fight, so they had to sit in the boardroom with him and his son, Don Jr. I mean, so he is good for television, but just the antics and the personality began to drive me crazy. I'm glad you said that, Rod. What policies? And when I say that, I was going to clarify what Jonathan was talking. The policies, and I'm trying to put your comment on the screen. I'm having some technical difficulties here. There we go. Thank you. The policies that I'm talking about are the ones that were really dealing with more so putting America first. I'm a firm believer of that. I don't, my reasons for border control are probably a little different than what his might be. And we've had this conversation before, John. I think that America has to get back to putting America first. Every other nation that we deal with, I look at what we invest in terms of NATO, and we're basically carrying it on our shoulders. I think there's a need for us to have a world presence, a global presence, but I think that every nation should pay their fair part. So I think those are one of the policies that I strongly agree with him, because we got a lot of stuff going on here in our country. We could afford a lot more things if we stopped spending billions of dollars around the world. Go ahead.
And I think that's generally true of people that agreed with his policies. They agreed with his international policies. He kind of followed that speak softly, carry a big stick when it came to international things, where other leaders that may not exactly be on the up and up with the U.S. at least thought he was crazy enough that they weren't going to deal with him. They weren't going to try him. And the same thing like with NATO and all that. It's like, okay, well, on the international stage, he did very well at prioritizing America. And of course, he got ridiculed for it.
Well, I think that's consistent with his personality. I think he's quite arrogant. So me first is going to be a part of how he operates. It worked for me in that particular situation, so I didn't care. Now, what I will say to you, Rod, to continue with what I was saying when you were talking about what policies, I am what you would call a GDI. When I was at Michigan State, I ticked off a lot of fraternity people because I got Greek lettered sweatshirts and a hat, me and some of my friends, and we had Gamma Delta Iota on it. And all of the fraternities were trying to figure out which fraternity we were part of. And, we were like, God, the independence. Gosh darn independence. I agree with that. I don't believe Trump, and you believe in the same regard. I don't believe that wait a minute. I agree with that. I don't believe Trump and you believe in the same America. No, and so hear me out. This is where we have some space for grace. And I am not a monolith. Okay. I don't think all Black people think the same. We have the same thoughts, opinions, and things of that nature. I tend to be a bit more in my thoughts socially, to some degree. I'm probably a little bit more left thinking. But there are some things that I think that I'm very much on the right side of my opinions. I think based upon an issue. I am an independent. And I don't think that the Democratic Party nor the Republican Party truly expresses where I truly feel. But there are pieces that I could pull together that I can stand up in agreement with. Yeah. So that was just one of the things that I agreed with him on. Another thing that I did believe, I like the concept of a free market economy. I think that there has to be some checks and balances. I think that capitalism works with checks and balances. And we often want to take the checks and balances off of capitalism completely. And I think that's when we're running into some problems. But I talked about borders, talked about that. I am a believer. I believe I'm changing this because I have lawyer friends that are continually challenging my perspective on the Second Amendment. Absolutely, and I can certainly agree with you, Roderick. I'm an issues guy. I'm not a political party guy. But anyway, they're continually challenging me on what the Second Amendment actually means. And so I'm doing these law school like reviews. I'm sitting in and listening to these conversations, getting all of this information and Cruikshank versus the government, all of these things. And I'm sitting here like, the Second Amendment, I think, says something differently than what we interpret it to say. And it's interesting. So I'm still formulating an opinion. So I am a guns advocate. I believe I enjoy guns. And so I'm going to say that. I always say Second Amendment. I'm not sure what the Second Amendment actually was trying to portray, and then how it's changed over time. So I believe in that. My family, we have great fun. We're not hunters anymore. We've done that when we were younger and kids. We don't do that. We just use them for firearms and shooting and things of that nature. But I do believe even in that perspective that we've got to have some checks and balances. Nothing should go unchecked. I think things being done in moderation is always a good thing. That's kind of what the good book says, right? We live and we do things in moderation. So that's interesting. There are some things that I don't necessarily agree with. And I'm not anti the blue. I'm not anti-police. As a matter of fact, as I've said a number of times before, I come from a military family. A number of them are police officers, military career, every body branch of the armed forces my people are a part of. But in that same token, with police, I think that there needs to be some serious rethinking on what policing means and how we actually implement that into today's society, because there are some problems. Recently here in the city of Saginaw, our state police have been called in because there's been issues, and I think that whenever you're sent to police a community that where there's no relationship built in that community, we end up with a lot of problematic situations taking place. So I see that taking place. So, but anyways, it wasn't really about how much we think. There's some things I like. The fact, I'll tell you what I love about Donald Trump. What I love about him is I wish that more people were the type of people who told you that they were what they were going to do and did exactly what they were told you they were going to do. Come hell or high water. I admire that. I do think that it does have some areas where it lends itself to problems, but I like straight shooters. The thing is, yeah, it's his personality and some of that other stuff that just kind of drove me over the edge. I'm a black man. I think that there's a lot of things. He's got a lot of racists in the camp, which is problematic. Any black man supporting a man like that, it is problematic to me. So there are some things of that nature as it relates to civil rights, human rights, equality. There's a lot of things to be desired. But anyways, he has now been charged. The issue that I have with that is, first of all, I think that as a nation of law, no one is above the law. We say that, right? And I agree with that. But I just struggle to see, unless there's something seriously heinous that's been taking place, seeing a former president in a white collar prison, whatever color, create a new collar prison. I just don't see it happen. I don't think it's a good look for us as a nation. And it's unfortunate. I was like, okay, they obviously are going to have something serious if they're going to bring these charges. It was much ado about nothing. And we were kind of talking about that before, like, what is this really going to be about? Now, there could be more that's out there. Maybe he's holding his cards close to his sleeves because the details and all that other stuff have not been outlined. But I from what we saw, it's kind of disappointing that we're wasting taxpayers' dollars on things of this nature. I would not want any politician to be a part of this type of prosecution, and I think that it speaks to his narrative that he is being politically prosecuted. even though our court system should be apolitical, we understand that you were something before you got into office, and we carry those traits and thoughts and opinions with us. So it is what it is. Most people feel that he's guilty, which I think he's guilty. I think he's a crook. I think he's doesn't have much of character. Or what is it? Characters is the word. What's the term that I'm looking for?
Integrity.
Integrity. That's the word I'm looking for. Thank you. Yeah, I don't think he has great integrity, and I don't think that's what they put him in office to have. Really, do any of our politicians really hold? Do we look at them and say, "Wow, they have great integrity"?
Yeah, the one piece of commentary out of this that I've seen and like totally agreed with so far is the people in power generally have this agreement that, okay, these are rules, but they kind of apply to those people over there.
Yeah.
All the rules that would apply to us, you have to prove intent, which is virtually impossible to prove in court. You have to prove this, you have to prove that. So it allows them to kind of skirt that. And now that that weapon is being used in that political arena, it doesn't bode well.
Yeah, no, not at all. Now, one thing that I think is great, I think if we're looking and we're aspiring for a better America, I think it would be great to really have a conversation of, is morality even a key piece that we would look for our national leaders? And I think that most people don't, because I think people want leaders to do what we want them to do and not what would be best morally for our entire nation. And so I think that we are a part of the problem. So why should he not be prosecuted? I didn't say that. What I said was that nobody is above the law. And so a part of me says, yes, we should all be held accountable. But the reality of the situation is, and this is where the issue came in, not that he shouldn't be prosecuted. Confused if you believe he is guilty. I think the whole world believes he's guilty. I don't even believe the Republicans that are standing up for him believe that he's guilty. I think it's just the fact of, why are we creating this dynamic for a former sitting president? When the fact of the matter is, we know that if anything, we've seen the people who were charged with similar things, they got fines. So find the man. Let's not make it seem like we got a major smoking gun going on and something is getting ready to happen. Now, as it relates to the campaign interference things that are taking place, I think those are real serious deals. And I think, let me correct myself. I think that whenever we are lying, whether it's in business or new, every other man would be charged. And so I think that I don't have an issue with the charges. I just have an issue with how we allow this to be portrayed, whether it's in media or politically, as if this is something super like out of this world and this is getting ready to happen. I think the fact that we charge a former president is something that's out of this world. And I'm conflicted by it. So allow me to be conflicted, Mr. McCullough, because I do feel that everyone should be held accountable. But I also think that we also have to think how we are positioned on a national stage. And what does it look like when we put our former leaders in prison for things that we send other blue collar worker or white collar workers and we give them fines for? So that's where I'm at. So I don't have a clear cut path. I'm conflicted in my position on that. And I'm not going to fight to take one place or another. We'll see how this thing rolls out. But I do think that we all have to be held accountable. The next thing, on to brighter, lighter news. UConn Huskies, they are the NCAA champions. You know what I'm going to tell you? I know you're not a big sports person, John.
Nope.
And I think Mark and I would have had a good conversation. You guys may not know this, but Mark, my co-host Mark, he actually played with former President Barack Obama. He played against him, actually. But SDSU, San Diego State University. I'm going to tell you, I was like, first of all, by the time we got to the Sweet 16, I was kind of like, who are these teams and where did they come from? This was the most crazy topsy-turvy NCAA tournament that I have seen in a long time. After the first round, I think everyone's brackets were busted. None of the teams, with the exception of Kansas, were yet in it. They happened to put out my alma mater, Michigan State University, go green. But I thought we were seeing a game. It was David against Goliath, and unlike the Bible story, Goliath won this one. SDSU, the Aztecs, They were super scrappy and fast and fun. They were fun to watch. They were down by, I think, 12 at halftime, and they came out with their slogan, 6 by 10, that if they could get it, within or 10 by 6, they get within 10 points within 6 minutes, they would do okay. Then they went up to 15. They went down by 15 points, but then they brought the game back and they were within 5 points. It was an exciting game, a lot of fun. But in the end, all of the extra work and the Files won. So congratulations, UConn Huskies, their 5th championship for that school. Great team. We've seen them there before. They were no surprise. Also, we want to remind you guys that there's something called the Breaking Bread Conversation taking place Saturday, April 29th, 6 p.m. right here on your usual stations. We'll be broadcasting live. Or you'll hear the message as you would normally hear it. We're going to do a live recording on that day, but it will air on that Sunday at 7 p.m. the way that we currently do right now.
We hope.
We're hoping. But we're with Aaron Patrice of the Breaking Bread Village, so we're going to have some food and fun over at Mark's house, and Jonathan and his production studio. His production crew is going to be there to record and to make sure that we can keep the stuff. You ready, John?
That's redundant. Jonathan and his production. It's just me. It's only me. I'm
John,
ready. I got it already.
They don't have to know all of that, okay? But anyway, so that's going to be cool. Also coming up, we met on yesterday at the Temple Theater with the director Mike Kolef. Saginaw Short Film Festival is coming up. I knew you were going to ask me that, Rob McCullough. I saw it out the corner of my eyes. I'll get to you in 1 second. Saginaw Juneteenth Celebration Incorporated. We have an open call going on for short films, 10 to 15 minutes. And it's every genre of film, any type of thing. If it can be creative, if it's pictures, imagery, whatever, cartoons, animation, all of it is going to be included. Send your more information, or if you have questions, or your 10 to 12, 15-minute film to Kareem at KareemBowen.com. The submission deadline is technically April 30th. There's some people that are saying, well, what happens if we need a few more days? We understand the creatives. So we put that date out there. We have a hard date of June 1st, getting that information to us on a flash drive so that we can then do a pre-screening. So we're going to take a look at what you're talking. Rob McCullough, he asked the question, any thoughts on the women's tourney and controversy? What controversy are you talking about? What tournament? The women had controversy there was, and I don't even remember the players' names or the schools. I do remember the schools because I was reading about it, but there was a little melee. It actually started with one of the male players doing the hand in the face, like, I don't see you. And then one of the white girls, I can't remember what school she was from. So you're going to have to help me out with what schools. I'm not as into female basketball as I am into the men's basketball tournament, and that's my preference. But I can't remember Iowa, and what was the other school? So she, had a tremendous game with her hands in her face, like, I don't see you. Then the black girl comes and she does the same thing, and then it became a controversy. But let's be real about this situation. First of all, I thought it was ignorant to even make an issue of this. LSU. Thank you, Rod. You are keeping us honest. LSU and Iowa. And what took place was, first of all, it was a taunting situation. And guys taunt each other all the time. It's no big deal. But the rules are different for women. And so there was a taunting situation that took place there. The white girl did it. Black girl came back, did the same thing. And they was like, oh, she's classless. We can't use terminology like classless when we do the same thing. It's a situation of the pot calling the kettle black. You can't do it if you're a woman. You can't do it if you're a black man. One of those things. Monkey see, monkey do. If it's good for the goose, it's always good for the gander. We're going to take a quick commercial break, and we'll be back with more United Shades of Gray.
You're listening to United Shades of Gray on WSGW.
This is Kareem, and we're back with more United Shades of Gray, Conversations of Race in America. Thank you guys for tuning in. We are going to continue on our conversation. Good afternoon, Stacey Crosby. We see you also in that social media stream out there. I want to talk a little bit. We're going to continue our conversation that we had on last week when we were talking about the growing inequality and the growing wealth gap that's taking place in America. And so Mark is not with us here today, but Jonathan is here, and he has great thoughts and opinions. And we've had great conversation about this as well. I just want to begin just kind of, we've been talking about a number of things, and we kind of talked about what we call Reaganomics. If you all remember, when was Ronald Reagan the president? 1984?
If you're asking me?
Yeah, I'm asking you. Were you even born then?
No.
1980 or something like I think Clinton may have been 84 or something like that. I don't know. But anyways, find out. He's going to figure it out. Ronald Reagan was president between the years of
1981 and 1989.
So it was 84. He was still there. And so when I look at this, there was this whole thing that he came and he would, we termed it Reaganomics. And in the Black community, there was a comedian, I think it may have been Eddie Murphy, that was talking about he was going trick-or-treating under the Reagan administration, and he was like, trick or treat. Kids were like, trick or treat, and he'd open up the door and go, Reagan economics, meaning that you were not gonna get no candy because he couldn't afford it. It was a funny skit, SNL skit. But anyways, we were talking about this and how the concept that he had was that if we would create an opportunity, remove some barriers on financing, tax incentives, those types of things, that the blessings of blessing the rich would trickle down through our economic systems, and we would all live a laissez-faire, a great society opportunity. Didn't work quite well that way. John, what do you think about that concept, John?
I think that it ignores the idea that people are evil. I think that's a big problem in politics. Is on paper this looks fantastic, but it turns out people are terrible, so it doesn't work.
Oh no, I want to interject for Mark. No, John and I often we joke, and since Mark isn't here, we can go unfettered. We often say that Mark looks through life through rose tinted glasses. And you're right, and that people are selfish.
Yep.
And so they have a tendency to want to look out for themselves. It's all about my four and no more. And so that didn't work very well, right? So American history, and I'm going to just read some of the stuff that we have here. And I pulled some stats in from different places that I think are important. But American history is replete with horrific episodes that prevented accumulation of Black wealth. And this is so true. For centuries. First, it was slavery. And it's interesting because I sent you an article. Did you get a chance to read that article at all?
I did not. No.
Okay. It's a long article, so it may have taken you several days to read it. But anyways, one of the issues, slavery was the beginning, especially for Blacks. But then we had a period of time in American history where we had, actually it was the beginning. Before slavery, there was a period of time where we had a ton of indentured servants that came from Ireland and other places like that. And there was this, if you were an indentured servant, you were a slave. This was all labor that we were going to use and exploit. And then it became, they had to put in, and we talked a while ago about the Bacon Revolt. I don't know if you remember us talking about that, but it became an issue of classes and how do we, separate people. And then when they put in this whole social construct of race, we saw that come in. Then it became a hierarchy structure. So it's like, let's keep the slaves at the bottom and we'll, kind of hierarchy structure with the indentured servants. To eventually we saw that most of what took place was a situation where slave labor was a big piece of this, right? Then we had the servitude to the Jim Crow laws, the great Jim Crow laws of the South, which once slavery was abolished, and these are examples that we need to understand so people understand. Yes, slavery was abolished with the Emancipation of the Proclamation. Juneteenth is celebrated because no one knew that it was signed until, a year and a half later, 2.5 years later. So Juneteenth is a thing that's a celebration, or the annexation of freedom of blacks totally in America. All of us were free, and through Galveston, Texas. But then in this process, we have what is called Jim Crow laws, which then, now that you're no longer a slave, now you have freedoms. And I have to continually remind people that during the writing of the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, all of those things, blacks were considered to be 3/4 human. So dehumanization is a key role in order to keep any people slaved. You can't just treat people wrong. If you honestly, there's a moral compass I think that we have to some degree. And so if they're not human, then we can treat them the way that we want to. So Jim Crow comes in, and after they're free and you're off the plantation, now it's illegal to be homeless. And those same individuals that were on plantations were now put in slaves. Slave owners, or plantation owners, were able to go into the jails and get them out as labor, not necessarily pay them, but pay the state for the labor wages. And we went through this series, a period of time where we have been fighting. Blacks have been fighting for equality for decades. Then there were issues of segregated housing and schooling. There was a period of time where blacks could not own land. And that was one of the reasons, because it was necessary to be a landowner in order to have the right to vote. And so we see these things that were continually contributing to a wealth gap, schooling, seizures of property, and racial discrimination. And when we see that, we see things such as like the Harlem Renaissance, lake in Atlanta. I forget the name of the lake that's out in Atlanta that was flooded. That was a whole community of black, Lake Lanier. That's what it was. It was a whole community. And we have these throughout areas where they take public transits like highways, or they want to create a park, so let's flood the community where the black people are because they're doing too well over there. We see burning down of communities such as the Greenwood district for Black Wall Street and the Harlem Renaissance areas. Those were communities all over the place, and there were targeted opportunities or target strategic plans to keep them impoverished by destroying, burning down, and keeping away their ability. Absolutely. Central Park, most people don't understand that, Rod McCullough put in there, Central Park, New York City. There was a whole community that was displaced because they wanted to have a green space in Central Park. And it was an entire community with doctors and lawyers and, all of the things that you would have in a community. And they completely, eminent domain, took over the land, removed and displaced the people. Those people who had homes became homeless, once again, starting over to ground zero because they wanted to have a park. So there's a moving away from blatant racism to a system, and I use that word intentionally, that has the same ideologies of slavery and the Jim Crow laws. Then once Jim Crow was fully removed, those things became a part of how we were operating, and what I would use the term as systemic issues in our community. So all of these things are how we got here, and so we understand those things. And I often think, John, and Mark says this, I'm not concerned about how, what happened, but I want to talk about what we can do to move forward. And I was sharing with you how it's problematic to not talk about how we got here. Because I think it's important. Anytime you are going to solve a problem, you want to figure out how the problem was created, right?
I would agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah. So you got to figure out how it was created. And then I think the next step is, okay, what can we do to rectify this? And then also, not only to make it better, but also to make sure that these situations don't occur again. And understanding those key things, I think, are very, very important. So anyways, the result was that in 1962, 2 years before the passage of the landmark civil rights legislation and the Great Society program, that the average wealth of white households was 7 times greater than that of black households. This is when they began to really take a look at this racial gap in terms of economic profitability or sustainability or stabilization, I guess. And then decades later, after the decline, discrimination, and construction of modern welfare state, and that's a problem in and of itself. I think that's a whole show. The ratio remained almost exactly the same. The mean of Black household wealth was about $138,200. For whites, that number was $933,700. Off the top of your head, and I'm not asking you to be an economist or historian or any of those things, what would you think would contribute to that remaining the same a couple decades later?
Well, it didn't work.
John was like, well, it didn't work.
Yeah.
What do you mean?
I mean, any measures that were put in place obviously didn't have the intended effect. The thing to look at, and this is the thing to look at with, I don't know. I don't want to be the but
right. No,
person,
I mean, I think that's a,
but taking in the full context, matters here.
Right.
As that's happening, we've seen through history the super wealthy becoming even more super wealthy, correct?
Right.
And it's just been going up and up and up and up and up. That's driving that mean, that average number up and up and up and up and up. The vast majority of Americans don't have anywhere near $933,000 in household wealth. So I'm not sure.
Well, I mean, that's true. And when we think about the top 1% of our nation, we're looking at white. So that's going to be white America, right? So
the top 1% is not white America, but the top 1% is predominantly white.
That's what I mean. That's what I mean.
Okay.
Yes. To me, we said the same thing. But you're correct in the way that you worded that. Roderick, I'm not sure exactly what you mean. I was not designed to work.
It was not designed to work.
Okay, gotcha. Oh, okay, it was okay, gotcha. No, and I agree with you. I think that was when we talk about systemic, how issues became systemic, and it's funny because, so many people, we get caught up on terminology so many times that we lose sight of what it is that we're actually communicating. The point of language is so that we can communicate and understand what we're saying, but we allow certain words to trigger thoughts and feelings and opinions instead of really getting the essence of what it is that we're talking about. I know in many situations and even in conversations we've had right here, when I talk about systemic racism, people are like, systemic. No, that means that but the reality of it is ideas, thoughts, and ideology, those things don't die. And so if I feel a particular way on Monday and you tell me that how I am acting out and what I'm doing is no longer right, does it change how I think on Tuesday? Not at all. I still think the same, even though I'm not able to outwardly express that. And a perfect example of that is, thank you for the clarity on the moment. No, we got you. A great example of what we're talking about is the fear that people have about a Donald Trump repeat presidency, even just running as the nominee, because what he did is there's a lot of people who were told, listen, this is unacceptable. You can't say this. You can't do this, and so people are like, okay, well, if I do this, then this is going to happen. There's repercussions for my actions or even me thinking this way out loud. So I'm not going to do it. It's not that I'm not going to think it. It's just I'm not going to do it. And so what he did is he came and he began to speak to a population of our nation who I think has been overlooked and not necessarily spoken to. And they have felt that way for a long time. And so when he gave them the feeling that it was okay to feel how you feel, and they felt emboldened in where they were, we now see it's such a racist polar. It didn't come out of the thin air. People felt this way, and people wanted to feel this way outwardly, but they were told, no, it's a bad thing to do. And so that's why I think that even though I feel this way and I think this way and I can't express it this way, it's going to show up in my biases when I come into a place. So if I'm in a workplace or if I'm in a school system, how I feel and what I think and how I view things is going to be a part of how. That's what we do. We make decisions based upon how we feel and what we think. And so that's where we get this understanding of systemic. And I just think it's crazy because so many people get, oh, we don't believe in systemic racism. I think his running is a con. He sees it as a revenue stream. You know, you may be on to something. John, what do you think about this? This is kind of going off of where we are, but
he lost so much money as president that at least officially he lost so much money as president, where other people have gained a whole lot of money in similar positions, that no, I don't think it's a revenue stream. I think that it's an ego thing.
Well, I think it's an ego thing. I think he likes being president.
I don't think he cares about the money. He's been bankrupt a bajillion times.
Well, so. I mean, but his family has profited a lot as of his president, because there's one thing that is going to come out, and I think that they've been talking about this, is that Wall Street knows this. Everybody knows this, that it really has money. He's not as rich as we think he is. And so he has had, inflated claims of his wealth and things of that nature. So I think that running and getting those campaign dollars, those donor dollars, and finding ways to transfer that to other ways that he can utilize those funds and resources, it creates a power bank. When you have money and you are a political figure, being a part of the system, it creates a system of power in and of itself.
Do you think that's different from any other politician who's ever run for president ever?
No, but I just think that is kind of his thing, though.
Okay.
Like other people,
you think it's just another grift for him.
Yeah. Okay. I think that they all have to be a part of that system.
Yeah.
We make it that way. It's stupid, but we make it that way. We don't read about candidates. We don't study what they're about. We don't get informed. We don't attend town halls. Whatever name we hear on the radio most is the name that we're going to vote for. So they got to fight for radio time and air time and news time and internet time. So they're spending bazillions of dollars on things that could really make an impact in our community.
Mm-hmm. And all publicity is good publicity.
There you go. $8 million taken in since he was indicted. Absolutely, Rob. We're not going down that rabbit train. We're not talking about that today. Rob's gonna make us change this conversation today.
Because to bring it back a little bit, that is the kind of thing that we're talking about, though, when it comes to the class differentiation. Absolutely. And the wealth gap in that regard.
Look at you,
where
you got to be wealthy to run for politics, right?
Yep. And if you run for politics, you're going to get more wealthy.
Absolutely. So these are some of the things that we're talking. Rob, you are hilarious, dude. So as we looked at this over the past 40 years, what we've noticed is that not only has that gap, 7-to-1 ratio, remained the same, but in fact, we see it growing. And to one of the things that Mark would always say, in this current situation, this current climate, the issue is it's almost independent of what we saw with how this thing started with slave and Jim Crow and all of the other issues. But now there is a new thing, and a lot of things are really about less about race and becoming more about financing. This tech world and this tech boom has created such a huge burst and just groups of wealth for some small populations, which now education, higher education, and specified education and technical education and training are key things that are driving this entire new divide in terms of wealth.
In regards to what Mark usually says, how would you feel about this? This is something that just kind of came in. How would you feel about this interpretation on it? It started out, yes, as black slavery.
Yep.
And since then, they found a way to expand it to ensnare more and more people, regardless of race. You've heard the term wage slave, right?
Yep.
You go to work, you come home, you've got no time for you, but you need to make that money in order to survive.
The working poor. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think this is a new concept to me, but I think that for sure, like in terms of my working through it, but I think that that's probably more accurate as to what happened. Was, yes, it started out as black slavery, but it's insidiously reached out and grabbed more people.
Well, I think that's what that's what greed does, though.
Yeah.
I think if you look at how this nation was started, it was started because there was a small aristocratic group of individuals that held all the power, all the wealth. And so this idea of coming here to spread the wealth and we all can achieve and obtain, the fact of the matter is, absolute power corrupts absolutely, and we see a returning to what we were created out of. And so no, I think that now it's really about how do I sustain my personal wealth, my legacy for my family and things. And that is now one of the key things that is continually pushing forward. That's always been a part of the pie, but it's really been about, it's been a black and white thing. And now we got white folks who are being consumed by the same monster that is continually consuming African Americans in this country. And so I understand to the point, like, how do we change that dynamic? I don't fight against that. I never do. But the thing that I cannot take off of the table as we talk about this is we have to look, and we now see we have poor immigrants that are in our country. We now have white Americans who are in our country and are suffering from so many of the same things that Black America is suffering from. But we have to also think and keep into the conversation that there is a differing reason as to why these groups have found themselves in the places that they have become. And there is a very different, when we think of ADOS, African descendants of slave, there's a very different reason why that population of people, my population of people, have found themselves initially in this place. And it wasn't that they could not generate wealth. And that's one of the key things as we talk about this wealth gap that we really have to deal with. We've got to get away from the concept or the idea of thinking that people are poor because they're lazy. You're that way because you're lazy. All you got to do is work hard. Well, there were times that people were working hard. I mean, look where we are. There's a lot of hard work that went into America being the nation that it is. And I'll continually say it, and I really don't care who gets frustrated by it. But when you go to places like Washington, D.C., that was all an entire community. You go to the mall, that entire mall was built by slaves who weren't paid for their labor. And so they were actually brought in, a wage was paid, but it was paid to the slave owners. And so it's not that Black folks are lazy. We have to have equal opportunity, equal access to opportunities, and to be paid an equitable wage for the things that we're doing. Excuse me, but my language is running away out the door. So as we talk about these conversations, and we got Dr. Brandon Irby who's going to be coming in. We thought we might be able to have him in here. He is a professor in writing. I'll say this the best way that I can, in writing and in African American studies and Black studies. He gives us some very interesting perspectives of why the wealth gap in Black America continue, what we need to do, and how we are going to be able to finally get over this. One way is that we've got to begin to generate wealth in communities, lower impoverished communities. We've got to begin to understand that education is going to be a key component of that. If we continually have suburbs with the best educations on the planet, and we have inner cities where education is kind of like going to baby Beirut, whether or not you survive in school. And I say that not only for Blacks but for whites, because what I work with some young people, and one of the things that I tell them in many situations, if you are a young Black white dude growing up, in a trailer park or in certain communities, a lot of the issues you're going to be confronted with are going to be very similar to those of the Black community. And so we need to begin to have these conversations. Here are my thoughts. I think there needs to be some equality of pay, equality of opportunities. We need to ensure that consumption against these disruptions, like medical expenses, surprise expenses that take away from the bottom line of a family, can be dealt with and met with. Affordable housing, good public schools, access to secondary education, and funding of that education, because we have so many students that get to become juniors and seniors and then run out of funds for graduation. And then lastly, I think that any conversation that's really wanting to address the issue as it relates to African descendants of slaves, reparations has to be a part of that conversation. I want to thank you guys for tuning in. We'll see you next week. God bless you. Grace and peace.